Hello there. Welcome to our second video here at the QC in our series wandering through the books from the shelves behind me as we talk through their methodology, not simply the content within them. Now last week, we spent a lot of time with Langer and Copy as we worked through how arguments are structured, how we can work through them deductively, symbolically. But there's something specific about every one of those examples and every single thing in both those books that you probably missed. You see, every argument in them was already built. Not even just built, but built to be examples for deductive logic. Now, these examples are a bit of an idealized form of thought. I mean, that's kind of the point. You start with this, with the easiest to grapple things. But see, here's the thing. Arguments aren't usually binary in that true or false sense. Also, most arguments don't pre-exist you. Instead, we tend to make them when we think, almost passively as we read or talk or look around. So today, we're going to be looking at Johnson's Argument and Inference, which to me is one of the better and easier guides in how to use this next tool. It's a process called inference. It's induction. It lets us reason, consider things that aren't certain or even known, like most things. And it's a core tool in All right, so let's go back a little bit. Now we know from Copy and Langer, arguments require premises that support a conclusion, but it's not true that all arguments are created equal. Johnson opens up the book by pointing out that sometimes premises may be meant to support a conclusion, but they don't. You see, in logic, you're actually not determining the veracity of things outside of logic. It's a system that lets you see if something is internally coherent to itself. So let's look at two examples that he provides. He gives one. Jeff, this kid, has slept with a chemistry textbook under his pillow all night. He slept all 7 hours. Therefore, he will do well on his chemistry exam today. See the problem here? The premises have no support for the conclusion. It's not how it works. The idea that proximity to a textbook while sleeping would transfer knowledge via some weird osmosis of education violates everything we know about how learning or life or brains work. We would, again, not really read this for truth, though. We read this for truth value. And if this was the last video, I might say that if the propositions are true, then the conclusion is true. That's a pretty goddamn big if, though. So let's look at the second example, though, about another way this goes awry. I grew up in Denver. Denver is the largest city in Colorado. Colorado is the 24th largest state in the United States. Therefore, Denver is the 24th largest city in the United States. Conclusion. Again, the truth value of each statement is structured right, but the argument assumes a correlation between states' relative sizes and the relative sizes of cities, a connection that just doesn't exist in the real world. Now, here's the thing, though. Despite their flaws, both are arguments because the premises are intended to support the conclusions. That's what an argument is. If we just take the structure, this symbolic logic of it, we would end up with truth tables and setups. Truth tables that would say if these are true, then the conclusion true, true, false, all of that. But this does not help us. It doesn't give us a clue if any of the statements are useful in any capacity. Instead, what is needed is for us to look into the premises, and through that, we can use the symbolic structure to determine its veracity. See, let's talk about it. So, sleeping with a textbook under your pillow. There isn't really a clear effect directly on knowledge or testing, but you could say the type of person who sleeps with it under his pillow might just be the type of person to memorize the damn book or fall asleep with it every night for 2 months. Or maybe it's a last-ditch effort in a prayer and they got high the night before. It's kind of tough to know. It's not something that's going to give us certainty. And deductive logic requires every damn thing to be certain in kind of a closed system itself. It's got a truth value of either true or false, 1 or 0, binary, total or gone. And certainty, that key thing, this is how we distinguish between deductive and inductive arguments. Deductive arguments are those where if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true, right? That's what we did last time. We take the example. Mary is either in the library or the cafeteria. She is not in the library. Therefore, she is in the cafeteria. Now, if both premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. There's no other possibility. That's how it's built and structured. In contrast, inductive arguments offer probability rather than certainty. Johnson defines an inductively strong argument as one where the argument is not deductively valid, and if the premises are true, then they make it probable that the conclusion is true. Here's an example, one that's kind of similar to something you've probably experienced. This guy, Jeff, lives next to this neighbor. They live together a few blocks from the state university, the campus there. And Jeff's next door neighbor looks about 20 years old, and he's always wearing stuff from that university, hoodies, hats, fucking big giant foam fingers, all of that. Therefore, Jeff's next door neighbor attends state university. Now, even if all the premises are true, there is a chance the conclusion is false. Perhaps the neighbor is just a fan of the sports team, or really is looking at college girls to do horrifying things to. You know, I don't know. The premises, though, they make the conclusion probable. It's an inference, something to infer. Deductive arguments, they draw out information that's in the premises. Inductive ones use the premises as grounds for a new measured guess or thought about new information that's not there. And that's the thing, that new information that you're inferring. This is inference. It's the step beyond the premises that we take fairly automatically, even if we do it badly. We often do. Someone will come across some data. And again, data is not just numbers. It's a lot of stuff. The example in the book, comets. I mean, we didn't always know what comets were at all. Long ago, Aristotle thought they were just disturbances in the air. Tycho Brahe used parallax measurements to actually prove they were not just beyond our air, but beyond the moon itself. Isaac Newton, he believed he saw the same comet twice, but he couldn't prove it. He only had a couple points of data. Couldn't really make an inference. It would actually be his buddy. You might recognize the name. Halley? Halley, as in Halley's Comet, he would use Newton's work to put together a lot more data. 24-ish comets in all, and he compared their orbits. And by looking at this, he inferred that some of the comets are the same comet, that they actually return to us fairly regularly. And that he put in a hypothesis, all inferred. And to do this, we're really not far from our time with Copy and Langer. Again, we still deal with things by premises and conclusion. This is part and parcel with what you might call the scientific method, the mathematical method, but it's definitely the inductive logical method. So you start with the first premise, premise 1. You state your hypothesis, your explanation for something you can't directly observe. This is your inference. And premise 2 is a prediction based on that hypothesis. So it's something like, if this hypothesis is true, then blah, 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 blah. Premise 3, describe the data you've collected to check your prediction. Premise 4, state whether the data match your prediction or not. If the data doesn't match, you can conclude that the hypothesis is probably false. Toss it out. There you go. But if they do match, you're not done. There's a 5th premise that Johnson really hits you over the head a lot with, and it's that you need to consider whether there are reasonable explanations for your data. This kind of leads you to 2 conclusions. If the hypothesis is the best explanation for your data, you can conclude it's probably true. The truth value is probable. If there are other equally good explanations, instead you land in an indeterminate spot. You need more evidence. Now, this whole thing, all across the board, people fuck up in kind of every way. RFK Jr. is kind of like the perfect person to watch and learn how not to do any of this. It's just awful because all of these premises, they can be used for lots of thinking. But when you do this, when you have a hypothesis, when you're inferring something, there's a very particular thing you can't do. Whatever data, information, factor, anything that led to that inspiration in that hypothesis, that stuff got to stop there. You don't take those in. So let's take an example, chemtrails, because it's hilarious. You see them. You don't know what they are. Sure. But that you saw them or that they visually exist, that is the thing that made you guess that they're something wild. Seeing them then is not proof that they are something wild. It's a weird step, and people make it a lot. You're going to do this too. I've done this. You're going to do this in books. You're going to do this in philosophy. You're going to do this in watching TV. You're going to read one book or another, and something's going to spark this idea in your head about the writer trying to get at something or something the writer hadn't thought of. And then you'll take that idea and you'll bolster it with the passage that inspired it in the first place. And you won't know you did it. It's really tough to realize you did that unless you're actively working to stop yourself from doing it. It's difficult because you're dealing with new ideas. A new inference necessarily is indirect. It's something we can't see. You can't know. It exists outside. It's a pure abstraction almost. Like Halley's Comet and his claim that it would return just a few years after his death. There's no way he could ever have seen this. Turned out he was right. Chemtrails, are they a government operation or the nature of condensation and speed and interaction of that? Or one for me, Deleuze is actually a philosopher of logic. None of these things actually are just sitting there as facts waiting for some sort of version of you to come along and just pick it up. It's about the probable. And because also language just decides it can't help but fuck us at every turn, we often take induction colloquially to be deduction. Because why not? The book goes on. We associate deduction with Sherlock or police or detectives. They deduct things. They're deducing machines. A detective in the book, he suspects John stole $1.3 million from his company. Now, the detective didn't directly observe whether John committed the theft. They almost never do, because that would be observable direct evidence. That would not be that would not be inference. They're inferring that. And he's inferring it after interviews and all kinds of things. And so, even though he can't see it, he starts making guesses, educated guesses about whether John committed the theft and predictions with it. You know what? John probably has an unusually large sum of money in his bank account. Or John is going to have a secret bank account. Or John's relatives suddenly got richer. When none of these predictions match the evidence, the detective, unless he's shit, is going to conclude that John probably didn't steal the money. But Johnson raises a really interesting point. Should we say that John is innocent or just that it's probable? It's a tough one because, again, we're talking about probables. It's really hard to formulate perfect predictions. So for Johnson, he suggests it's safer to draw the conclusion that the hypothesis is probably false. It's not so much saying he's innocent, and this probably false a lot. He says it a lot. It's key here, and again. See, false and probable are contextual. What we are talking about here is not getting, again, to the certainty of some totality of truth, but instead playing with probabilities that any conclusion inside of a set system has a truth value of 1 or 0. I mean, again, once we know the truth, once we have video recording of John walking out with a big bag of money filled with $1.3 million, fuck does induction matter anymore? What fuck does reasoning or logic? You got it. You're done. But until that miracle lands, we have these pretty simple tools to put things in the right context and keep ourselves and our readings in check. So let's do actual work here. from the crime story about embezzlement earlier. Let's lay it out. The conclusion itself, pretty easy. The odds that John stole the money. See, the first proposition is also pretty easy. That's the conclusion. The first proposition would be that John doesn't have a secret bank account. See, the reason for this, and the reason it's set up like this, is actually because of how Inference operates, and it's why I like Johnson's setup. So the detective goes, you know what? I think, because again, this is a gut feeling thing. It's on Inference. It's on a bunch of stuff. It's a new idea. This isn't about exact math. This isn't the probability of dying in a raid in World of Warcraft calculated in some fucking program. This is different. So the detective goes, I'm going to lean. It's just over 50% that he did it. It's just, it's easy. And it shows us, again, this argument is not deductive. Obviously, none of these things I've said so far are directly related. There isn't a totality of truth that can be determined here. It's probabilistic. It's a declaration saying John probably stole it. Now, it's not a strong argument, of course, but we can add a few things. How Johnson walks you through it, and it's why I recommend picking up the book and going through the exercises, is because this inference, the way this detective did it, you actually have the ability to, if you go through Copy and Langer's methodology, tease out all the inferences that you're actually making without even knowing about it. So, first, easy inference. John was the first suspect. There's no reason for that, but the confidence the detective had was pretty high. The reason he was the first suspect was there. There's something going on. So, boop, put that in. Second, we can add odds about all the other correlations that are kind of implied here. And again, we're going to talk about that conjunctive from last week. So, what are the odds John doesn't have a secret bank account and, conjunction, that he stole the money? Well, actually, the odds that both of those things are true, parentheses with boop, right in the middle, right? It's actually pretty low that those things would be true. I mean, if he has a bank account and he didn't steal the money, that would be weird. Secret bank account and not stealing? Now, the odds he doesn't have a secret bank account and that he didn't steal the money, that conjunction, that's actually a really high conjunction. Each of those things becomes its own statements, its own proposition. Now, we include these after thinking through it because this is the information that the inference really has in the first place. Without this, the entire thing is actually nonsense. These can be gut checks. They can be feelings. It doesn't really matter. But again, the logical deductions you're making, the inferences you're making are structured, and they're built in these very ways, in these types of conjunctions. It's super important to understand how your inferences are built. Take a silly version of it. Then we'll do a really depressing version because why not? It's the QC. On the sillier side, try chemtrails. So I put forth the proposition that planes make trails in the sky. And my conclusion is that, of course, the government is made of lizard people spraying with tons of planes, these chemicals everywhere to create impotence and autism and all kinds of other things, heavy metals everywhere, for reasons. Now, go through that and add in the things to create that inference. What are the conjunctives? What are the things that you're not even including? Feel free to do it in the comments. I would really love to see it because anyone who actually does it in earnest will see how silly the entire fucking thing is. Less on the silly side. We need to also realize that inference hits us emotionally, not just with silliness, but in some pretty serious ways. The example in the book that I really like, I think is actually perfect. It's a woman who gets a positive mammogram result. It's devastating, generally, but take a second. Realize the inferences that are made. Properly assessing this requires knowing kind of other things because it's not directly related. We know it's not a deductive relationship. We know it's an inductive relationship. So, what are the other things? What are the things that inform this to this? Well, first, we've got the base rate. And for this woman, let's say that she's actually in a really low risk group. So 0.8% of women actually get breast cancer in it. The second thing we get is what's called the true positive rate. When a woman has cancer, the mammogram correctly shows positive 90% of the time. And then 10% is more depressing. Third, the false positive rate. See, when a woman doesn't have cancer, the mammogram incorrectly shows positive 7% of the time. Now, applying the odds as Johnson goes over them, and it's fantastic, it reveals something really surprising. Despite that positive test seemingly demanding a conclusion, the reality is there's only a 9.4% chance the woman actually has cancer, because the low base rate of cancer means that most positive results are going to be false positives, and you can just sort of normalize that across. This is how we work with inductive logic. We like to think we are perfectly rational, that we're logical. The reality is that thanks to how inference runs our daily life, we get emotionally invested quickly in everything. Inference is that step. It's not bad, though. It's actually an amazing thing when you think about it. Here you are in a world of concretes and absolutes, and seeing chemtrails, reading a philosophy book, looking out and seeing people in a crowd. You're moving from something actual. And from that, you're creating something purely virtual, probable, the maybe, a pure abstraction. Making a guess about what you're reading, the ways in which these things collide and cross over. And as we move forward in this thing we're doing here, we are going to be talking about methods, certainly throughout everything. But I cannot tell you how often we are going to come back over and over and over to this inference, what you infer, what I infer, and the challenges that gives us for understanding what we're actually doing and what we're understanding. Be watching this week. I'm going to be doing live streams. We're going to have fun with this methodology. It's kind of fun to dig in and find where we infer in TV, comic web, video games, whatever else we can. It's fun. I look forward to you joining. But also, I just want to give a note to my patrons. You are amazing. You enable me to make these videos, and I appreciate each and every one of you for the support you give. It is absolutely, absolutely wonderful. If you'd like to join them, follow the link in the credits. And until then, I'll see you soon enough.